You're listening to Health Coach Conversations, a podcast where our conversations help health coaches all around the world to level up our businesses and to get more clients. Allie is the host of the top-ranked podcast, Insatiable, a holistic nutritionist and integrative health coach, and rebel with a serious cause. She's academically, practically, and empathetically aware of how the medical system, diet culture, and body positivity movements all have their own flavor of crazy. Allie developed Truths with Food while in graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania, where she drew from her decade plus of working with real-life clients and her own personal healing journey from emotional eating and having cancer as a teenager. Today, we're going to talk about how to create your own methodology for greater impact and business ease. So welcome. I'm excited to talk to you today.
You too, Kathy. Thanks for having me.
So what are the two types of change?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I think in coaching, we tend to mix them up, and not just in coaching, but life in general. Dr. Ronald Havitz, who is one of the leading thinkers on change, says the biggest mistake we make is we try to solve adaptive change challenges with technical solutions. So it's a common problem. So technical change, the best way to describe it is if you have a problem, you can probably Google the answer, right? It's pretty easy to identify. As health coaches, we may have clients who say, hey, I want to run a 10K. Okay, so we know there's tons of 10K, couch to 5K. There's tons of plans out there. And you can solve that problem with new information or a new skill set, right? And you can teach someone that. Right. Also, a technical problem is, we had a leaky faucet and it was like my husband went on YouTube and learned how to fix the faucet. If clients are struggling to make time for cooking, you can teach them some cooking hacks right here and there. And so that's the technical type of change, basically new information and education. And the problem's pretty easy to identify. Oh, I need to know how to run. I need to know how to get my endurance up. I need to know how to fix this faucet. Where most of our clients come, especially, I work with clients who have really challenging time changing their food habits. They've read all the stuff. They've tried all the technical solutions, like, let me try this diet. Let me try that diet. And this is what's called an adaptive change challenge. And adaptive challenges, I often think of how. Okay, maybe I need to eat healthier, but how do I do that? And believe it or not, the solution doesn't exist yet. You can't Google it because it's going to be different based on each person's lifestyle, where they're coming to the process, what their caregiving responsibilities are, right? We just talked about how you were able to leave Florida because all your kids are out of the house, right? Everyone has different time constraints, different control over their time. So there isn't really an existing known solution. And not only is everyone different and coming to the challenge of change differently, but also the root cause of what's actually preventing them from changing is really difficult to identify. And it's really easy to deny or exist. So in my work, for example, I work on how people turn to food when they feel like they don't belong, that they're not attaching to their own needs, because food is coupled with attachment from the time we're born. And so I have to help clients identify the stories that make them feel not enough or too much. And then they turn to food, which stimulates attachment chemicals, but doesn't give them the belonging that they actually need. So that work is hard to do. It's much easier to be like, oh, I just need to do another 30-day eating challenge and that will solve this. It's just a better plan out there. These are problems also. So once we identify these are problems that can't be fixed in a nice, neat bow. They have to be navigated through. You have to actually become a different person on the other side of it. These solutions can't be taught. So, most of us as adults have gotten advice where we're like, okay, I know I should do that, right? But I don't do it. Why don't I do it? Because, and you've talked about this in podcasts, and I know this is a lot of the work you do, is how do we get our clients to want to do what they need to do, right? And so that's part of an adaptive change process, is like really tapping into not telling the client what to do, but leading them there to those discoveries on their own. And what's really important about this is, again, these solutions can't be taught, but our clients have to experiment in new ways. So I think of, the way that I teach blood sugar is around macros. So clients often think they have to stick to a perfect meal plan. And I'm saying, and then once they learn this more flexible structure of blood sugar, it's like, let's see if even if you can't have the perfect types of foods that you prefer when you're traveling, can you still do good enough that you feel satisfied, your cravings are gone, right? It's like, oh, I have to take new action to actually discover that I don't have to perfectly stick to a plan. So we really learn through experimenting and taking new action, not sticking to some sort of protocol or plan. And then lastly, and I think this is really important, and this is, I think, ideally where coaching sits, is that we're actually in a more mentorship relationship with our client instead of the expert. So we're really partnering with them and being curious with them and helping and understanding that they're the expert of their own experience, their own life. And we're just kind of the guide on the side, And so those are the big differences between technical and adaptive challenges. And when it comes to health, I think for those listening, it's really easy to think the more stubborn change challenges that just don't require more information or more education tend to be the adaptive challenges.
How do you keep from telling somebody you have to do this and change now instead of being patient with them as they go?
That's actually a really great question. Do you want me to answer it?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. So this brings up this model that I use in my Truce coaching certification. And it's part of the trauma-informed piece of the Truce coaching certification. But if you think of each adult, we have a healthy adult self. And that healthy adult self is what brought us to coaching. It's the one that is creative, imaginative, can think, can give discernment, right? Like, oh, if I eat this, I'm probably not going to be able to sleep tonight. And then that's going to set me off, right? If I don't move from my desk, I'm going to be more tired. That's the healthy adult self. And we all have access to that. All of our clients have access to that. That's what brings them to coaching. Okay. And then you have your survivor self. We all have a survivor self. And a survivor self is actually blocking the traumatized self. Most people have trauma, and the survivor self is protecting us from that trauma. And so most of us will not encounter the trauma self in coaching, but we will encounter the survivor self. And part of what the survivor self does is it distracts itself, right? It doesn't do what it's doing, what it should be doing. It eats, right? It drinks, it overindulges as a way of compensation. There's a lot of denial about the problem when we're in our survivor self. So that is often what is happening. Our client is in their survivor self. Now, we as coaches also have a survivor self. And so if our survivor self gets entangled with the client's survivor self, right? So our survivor self is often frustrated because we want to provide value. We've gotten our worth by fixing things, by moving things forward. And so what ends up happening is this thing called entanglement, where as the coach, your survivor self is now entangled with the client's survivor self. And it's a really frustrating situation for both people. So it's knowing that and having the self-awareness, it's like, oh, okay. I always tell one of the first things we talk about in my Truce coaching certification is when you're encountering that survival self who isn't making progress, the thing to ask yourself and also ask the client is, why does this make sense? Why does it make sense that you're struggling? Instead of trying to double down on the plan, trying to reconfigure the plan, and recognizing in ourselves what's coming up. Oh my God, I feel like I need them to like me and they're not getting results, right? Like whatever your own self-doubt that comes up because it's your survivor self. I think it's just recognizing that and then asking, why does this make sense? And that is really the window into the real problem, into the adaptive change process. I should say the invitation into that kind of process. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And that's a good way to say it too, invitation.
Yeah.
What's the importance of and understanding the difference between adaptive change and technical change?
Yeah, I think the importance is that many of us, and I've mentored and taught other coaches, not only in my own certification, but in different health coaching groups. And what happens is if you think you have a technical change process, right? Client coaches say, oh, when the client isn't moving forward or the client's frustrated or I'm frustrated, they think, oh, I have to pull another rabbit out of a hat, right? Like I have to find another tool, or they start doubting their own coaching ability, or a lot of times the client stops coming because they feel guilt and shame that they're disappointing the coach, right? And so understanding all of that is really realizing, oh, I don't need, and I call it shiny object syndrome. Like I don't need a shiny new tool. I need to really help figure out how to move my client from the survivor self back to the healthy adult self. And that is a process that it doesn't mean there aren't tools that can help it. And the Truth Coaching certification that I run, it's really the whole structure of change. So there can be tools that are helpful, but it's about the right tool at the right time and getting the client to realize that them falling off track or them, distracting themselves with work, which is why they couldn't get to your work. Oh, you're in a survival mode. Like, why does that make sense? And the importance of that is when you lead with, why does that make sense? You're actually making the client feel safe in the coaching client relationship, that it's safe to struggle. It's safe to figure out what's actually underneath and at the root cause of the stubborn behavior change. So that's a long kind of way of saying, I think the benefits are you don't get trapped by shiny object syndrome and invest in a bunch of tools that probably aren't going to move the survivor self to the healthy adult self, or at least not understanding how they can do that, adapting that. The clients keep showing up and you both have a much better time. And results, I think, is the really important benefits of knowing the difference between that.
Do you count percentages of people that you help and that come out of your coaching way ahead, or no? I'll bet you've got a high percentage is what I'm thinking.
The coaches or my clients?
The clients.
Oh yeah. You mean like way ahead in terms of
the way that you deal with the coaching aspect of it?
Oh,
It
yeah.
really helps a lot.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of my clients, they joke, but they're like, you're my last resort. Like they've tried.
Put a little pressure on you.
Yeah. Well, Wendell Berry, who is a farmer and philosopher, he says, when we no longer know which way to go, that's when the real work has begun. And that is how I view it. And I tell them that. And again, I also, from a business perspective, position myself that you've tried everything. But yeah, because part of what adaptive change requires is it requires new values or new ways of defining values. And for most of us who have grown up in Western culture, health has been defined as just tying everything back to weight loss. And weight loss is very emotionally loaded. And it will, when people are struggling with that, it will activate their survivor self. So they come out of this understanding that health is so much more than weight. And the research shows that paradoxically, the less you're just focused on the weight, the more likely it will happen, the more you try to just focus on work. So they learn to really enjoy the process. They learn to identify, oh, all of these things like moving my body. It's not just about counting calories that I burn. So they just end up feeling better. And that constant pressure, the food noise goes away. And it feels like I'm really successful, but this weight thing is still hanging over me. That just slowly dissolves more and more. So yeah, they do come out way ahead. And it's funny. I don't know if I would say even ahead, but they just feel like this was life-changing. Some clients say, it saved my life. I've had some clients who did bariatric surgery and then have said like, this saved my life. I've had other clients who just said it's life-saving for the life I was meant to live versus how I thought I had to be. So it's really fun work. It's deep and it's hard for the clients, but ultimately they'll say it was totally worth it.
Now we have a program, it's called Before Wellness. And I had the worst time naming it because we already had a stress program. And this deals a lot with stress, but it also deals a lot with issues that you have and self-care and things that are blocking you. And people by the end of that Before Wellness program are losing weight. And we don't even talk about losing weight. It's just
Right, right. It's like
yeah.
people, well, and that's a classic, like, right? We think as a technical problem, if I want to lose weight, okay, the solution, okay, I got to get a good plan. I got to cut calories and maybe, but how is weight loss really the right goal? Right? Like maybe not, right? It's your program. It's a lot of some of my clients lose weight. I mean, some come to lose weight and they may lose weight later or whatever, but it's not the counting calories, getting to the gym more that they're missing. So I love that you brought that up, right? Because you're helping them through an adaptive challenge, which is stress. And it's like, oh, I didn't know this, I didn't know this was a pathway to weight loss.
Yeah. 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 I bet that when you're working with people, you're seeing them, deal with relationships and everything, coming out of it with a lot of pluses that they really didn't anticipate in the first place. Do they need to go in not really with a lot of expectation and just follow the path with you?
Well, I think, and I think part of being effective at business is communicating the value of what you're doing. And so the process is called Truce with Food. And I say that it's a process that becomes a practice. And so I want to deliver on that. But yes, I think people have, it's interesting because it's definitely an investment. I price at I don't actually know what the market is, but it's a financial, emotional, and time investment. So I think people on one hand
They
really
are expecting something.
Yeah, they are. They're hopeful, but they're also protecting themselves of like, this may not work for me because nothing else has. No matter, again, because the solution can be taught, no matter how much you say, this is different, this is not, you've never tried this before, they still have that like technical framework, right? Of like, but so I think it's both. I think they have high expectations and they also are hedging their bets.
What is the cost of getting them mixed up, including coaching, anxiety, and clients remaining stuck?
Yeah, I think what we talked about earlier is when you mix them up, the clients get stuck. You as a coach doubt yourself, especially if you're a beginning coach, right? And it's like there's so much risk, there's so much doubt on the business front, on the coaching front. So I think it takes a lot of coaches out of the game. I've had a lot of clients who have joined my Truce coaching certification after taking a couple different health coaching certifications. And they felt like, oh my God, when I get into these stickier situations, right? When they don't have the language yet for the survivor self, but I don't feel like I have the tools to give that to someone, and they doubt themselves rather than the training that perhaps wasn't, was aimed at something else. That training wasn't wrong. It was just for a different type of issue. And I think both the client and the coach want to deliver on results. And so clients don't get the results. And I think in health coaching and especially online marketing, there's this focus on like, well, you have to be great at the business aspect, which you definitely do. But having been doing this for 16 years and seeing a lot of people come and go, I think the mastery component of like getting really good at what you do is, to me, has been the biggest business engine for me. Yes, you have to talk about it and all that stuff is really important, but getting people those kind of results that they can't get anywhere else. And I think when you have an adaptive change model, which again, my Truce coaching certification is, you can take all your skills and gifts and tools. Like a lot of my clients who take that, one of my clients is a therapist, and she's also has a ministry background. And she created this program called Restore for female clergy who have a really hard time taking care of themselves because they have to tend to other people, right? That's their calling in life. But she was able to bring her inner family systems background, her ministry background, her therapy background, and create this Restore. That is the
That's
value.
a great name for that.
Isn't it? She's amazing. Yeah. My other client, Dr. Kirsten Kessler, is a naturopath. and she's sober. And through this adaptive change framework and the Truce Coaching certification, she's created a program called Swell that helps women who are a couple years into sobriety, like really physically get well and continue on their recovery process. So she's bringing her naturopathic gifts. She's bringing her sobriety journey. So some of the tools that everyone has, you can still use, but they're incorporating it into this bigger adaptive change process, which I think of as a stubborn change. We feel it as consumers as stubborn change. Clients feel it as that. But so I think the cost is you don't end up being able to develop perhaps a signature program that just leads to what you're known for. It leads to easier marketing. It leads to, I think, a real niche, right? Not just saying that you have a niche, but like really niching in a way. So yeah, so those are some of the examples of what I think you miss out on that and bringing your own coaching brilliance and unique life experiences to the table. And the world needs a lot of health coaches. I mean,
yes, they do.
Yes,
They do.
yes.
Why do you think so many coaches struggle with shiny object syndrome, where they're taking, one more course, they're getting one more tool instead of really developing a more unique approach?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes back to, first of all, I empathize. That was me when I first started out. Like, it was like, oh, these marketers are good at making you sound like this is the one thing that will crack the code. And I think, coaching and changing often overlap, but they're not always the same thing. And so I think when you don't have a bigger structure of how stubborn change, I'm not talking about, clients need to have awareness of their gut health or blood sugar, right? I mean, that's important too. That's part of my Truce with Food process. But I just think that we're not trained in the whole structure of change, complex change, stubborn change. And so that's part of it. But then again, our self-doubt, if we don't understand our own survival strategies, oh my God, I have to over deliver. Oh my God, I have to give them more. Versus these days, my clients really appreciate that this model is less is more. We're actually just reducing resistance versus giving them more to do. So I think that's there's two dynamics going on. There is a definite education and training gap, but then there's also our own self-doubt that, in my Truce Coaching certification, everyone goes through the process themselves so they can become more aware of their own survival strategies so they don't get entangled with their clients and they can, as we say in coaching, hold the space and grow their own capacity to be with their clients struggling. So I think those are the two main components.
I think to do that well, that's almost a necessity to go through that yourself, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. And everyone brings usually a business goal to work on, right? And realize what's their story from like stalling themselves in their business growth. But in that process, you get all this stuff that is protecting you from changing gets brought up. So you can start to realize your own survival strategies and move past them and then understand the power of that process, which then makes you more confident to get out there and market yourself. It's a really beautiful snowball going down the hill versus feeling like you got to push it up the hill all the time.
Yeah. Okay, so going backwards, what is the survivor self and the healthy adult self?
Yeah. Well, I think I said it earlier, right? The healthy adult self is like who brings you to coaching. It's our joyful, imaginative, creative, discerning self. It's the part of us that can feel big emotions and come back to what we need. I always use the example. It's usually too what we've been praised for. So I had a really easy time being smart in school, right? So if like I got on a test, if I got a C or a B plus, I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm stupid. It was just like, oh, I just have to try harder. That's the healthy adult self where we've had success. Don't get me wrong. I don't love getting a C, but I'm like, I can learn from that, right? But for most of us who are health coaching, our clients are coming and their weight itself brings in the survival self, right? The survivor self is like when you have setbacks, it's like, oh my God, this is about me. I'm wrong. and just uses a lot of what we think of as coping strategies, and doesn't have access to that discernment, and is just trying to survive. And again, its goal is to block the traumatized self.
Okay. Do you have any examples of how your truce approach has led to more coaching and business successes? You work with other coaches, right? You teach other coaches this.
Yes, and my truce coaching certification.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think Kinsey and Kirsten's examples are really great there. Kinsey actually just got a huge contract with what I think it's called One World Church, but she kicked off her Restore program on a cruise with all her, and is then, and then they will continue on virtually. And then Kirsten has the Swell program, which is really unique in its field, right? And then my one client, Laura, she was realizing that she was getting further in one session than the previous 5 sessions, the whole coaching engagement previously. And that kind of success led to doctor referrals, working less, making more, because often, and I don't mean this like in a derogatory sense, but our clients are on their best behaviors in the beginning, right? Like, all right, I'm motivated. This is going to be different. We're all feeling hopeful, myself included. I mean, none of us are, exempt from this, but often in traditional coaching, it can take a while to get to the survivor self, right? Or it happens after the engagement is gone. And so even though clients have made progress, they then backslide or stop with those. And I think for all coaches listening, I think it's really important to realize that in the nutrition and exercise world, it is known that people have a hard time sustaining results. It's not you. It's not your coaching. It's not the client. It's just known. Like I have so many friends who are trainers. They're like, yeah, we never this happens all the time here. And nutritionists will tell you the same thing. And it's again, because I think even though we're all about holistic health, I don't think our industry is yet caught up to holistic behavior change. So I just don't want anyone listening to think it's them as a coach. It's like,
right. And that happens a lot. So you have a free offer for everybody listening today, right? The Disruptor, is that what you call it?
Yes. Every month, I have a free coaching call where health coaches, practitioners, I call it Change Agent Disruption Hour, because again, people who have taken my certification are therapists, they're doctors, there are health coaches as well. They're sober coaches. And you can bring a challenge, your challenges with your clients. I can help as much as possible without having all the context. And sometimes there are also teaching calls just to learn more about sustainable complex change, which sustainable adaptive change is what those hours are about. And people can sign up at alishapiro.com/disruptor.
Okay, we'll put that underneath the podcast too, so that people can click on that.
Thank you.
You don't have to write real fast, alishapiro.com disruptor.
Or me, you're driving and you're like, I'm never going to remember that.
Yeah.
Or you think you will and then you never do.
Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. I think that any coach listening to it has to have learned a lot. And I think that your disruptor call would be really helpful for anybody coaching.
Oh, Well, thanks, Kathy, and enjoy all that sunshine down in Florida.
Thank you. Sorry about your snow.
It's sunny and 55 today.
Yeah. Amanda's in Michigan. That's my helper. And she said it was 51. I said it was the same temperature here when we walked the dog this morning. So we had on mittens.
I do think your blood thins when you move down south. Yeah, I do think.
If you can live through 100-degree summers, then you get a little cold in the winter when it's 65. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you liked what you heard, please give us a 5-star rating or review on iTunes.